Rolling.
Okay, so this is the first class in a series which I call the Trial of King David, really the Trials of King David. We start off, there's a Talmud in Shabbat which says anyone who thinks that David sinned is mistaken. So that raises two questions. One, why should we think he sinned in the first place? And secondly, if we did think so, why are we mistaken? So we start off again with another Talmud. This is a Talmud in the Yerushalmi Talmud, Rosh Hashanah. There's a discussion in the Talmud about dates, what dates we put on deeds. It's very important from a legal point of view to know if you have a deed, it has to have a date on it. And there's a question about what dates we put on, how we put on the dates. And in the course of that discussion, it also talks about months. As you know, in the Hebrew calendar, we have months which are full months, and months which are shorter months, 30-day months and 29-day months. So the Talmud says that all the months of King David were full, and all the months of King Solomon were short. In other words, the Talmud seems to say that King David had an advantage over King Solomon, and his months were all full. So the Talmud says, but wait a moment, we had a temple at the time of King Solomon. We didn't have a temple at the time of King David. So the Gemara says that, to quote from the book of Proverbs, which I say ironically was written by King Solomon, and it says, to do what is right and just is preferred to the Almighty rather than sacrifice. So that we see on the one hand, the Talmud refers to the works of King David as being right and just, and that's preferable to the temple and the sacrifices of the time of King Solomon. And then, really out of context, the Talmud brings a very remarkable statement. It says, Rav Huna said that all the 6 months that David was fleeing from Absalom his son, he would bring as an atonement a female goat. What does that mean? Someone who commits certain qualities of offences, serious offences, by not with full knowledge and intention, but by negligence or recklessness. For example, someone lights a fire on Shabbat and he forgot that it was Shabbat, or he forgot that it was forbidden on Shabbat. Then he, such a person, has to bring a sin offering to the temple. And an ordinary person, a commoner, brings a female goat as a sin offering. But a king, or the Nasi, the president, particularly a king, if he brings a sin offering, he has to bring a male goat. And Rav Huna tells us that during the 6 months that David HaMelech was fleeing from his son Absalom, if he sinned, he would have to bring a female goat. In other words, incidentally, the Gemara is telling us that during those 6 months that David was fleeing from Absalom, his legal status was a commoner and not a king. Because a commoner brings a female goat and the king brings a male goat. So as I explained, in a way this Gemara is hypothetical because they didn't have the temple yet. They only had it when David was fleeing from Absalom, and he came later. And there wasn't any question of bringing a sin offering. And further, we don't know that David had to bring a sin offering. Nevertheless, the nature of the Talmud is that we can learn law from a hypothetical situation. So here the Gemara is teaching us the law that during those 6 months that David was fleeing from his son, his legal status was not a king but a commoner. Why is this so? Well, I'll go into the question of the revolt and how it came that David was fleeing from it. But first of all, the question is, well, why did he have the status not of a king, but of a commoner? There were two possibilities. One is simply the fact that since he ran and fled from Jerusalem, and he was fleeing from his son, he didn't have the power of a king. The nature of a king is that a king is a king, right? He has subjects, he has power and authority. So if he was running away, he didn't have the power and authority. So we could say that, what we call memela, that is to say, in itself, the fact that he was running away meant that he was no longer a king. But I would rather say, and I'll bring some proofs, that it wasn't just that he was running away, but there was some kind of judicial decision that he was no longer a king, at least a temporary decision. And I'll explain why. First of all, you can't have two kings at the same time. By nature, a king is a king, you can't have two kings. So it would appear that in order for a king to be removed from his office, it would require some kind of judicial determination, like an impeachment of a president. I don't think that the mere fact that he ran away would be sufficient. And there is a very strong implication in the Talmud, not only in the Talmud, but also in the account of the prophet, that indeed there was some kind of judicial inquiry or tribunal. I want to say right away that all the source of what we say is contained in the book of Shmuel, the second book of Shmuel. And even though Shmuel had passed away at the time, the rest of the book was written by Natan, the prophet, and that has absolute authority, and no one can deny or dispute what is written in the book of Shmuel. We can explain it and amplify it, as we shall do, and we have a lot of midrashim, but no one can contradict what was written. Okay. So now, why do I say that there is some authority, that there was some kind of judicial decision or tribunal which judged the king? As we go on, I will show that in fact there were three different separate judicial tribunals regarding David. One was the courts here on earth, the lower court. Then there was a higher tribunal, which is the higher court in the heavens. And then I want to say there is also the court of public opinion, so that David will be judged in three different tribunals: in the court here below, in the higher court, and in the court of public opinion. So the first thing we have to know is what happened here. How did it come about that David was fleeing from Absalom, his son? There was, in fact, we shall see, a revolt which was led by Absalom, and that revolt is described in the book. I just want to preface it before we come to the revolt. The book of Shmuel describes the beginning, so to speak, but it's not really the beginning, because we'll have to learn a lot about Absalom the son and see how it came about that he led a revolt against his father. So the immediate revolt starts. It says that in the course of time, Absalom provided himself with a chariot and horses, and with 50 men to run ahead of him. That's right, David was still the king. Absalom was the third son of David, but the first son had died. We'll see the circumstances in which he died, Amnon. And the second son was called Daniel, or Caleb, was a very wise man who was immersed in Torah and did not take any part in politics or government. So Absalom, now that Amnon was no longer alive, Absalom was really the successor to David. He was the third son. And the natural successor, not necessarily the inevitable successor, but the natural successor. So after the events that we shall learn about, Absalom provided himself with a chariot and horses, yes, and 50 men to run in front of him. So that's a tremendous number of men. That's a very powerful expression that he showed that his intention was to be a power, if not the power, in the court. And then the verses continue that he would get up early in the morning and he would stand on the road which led to the city gate. Now, traditionally, the court sits on the gate of the city, the Shah, the gate of the city. That's traditionally where the court sits. So Absalom would get up in the morning, and if there was a litigant, someone coming to bring a case or a dispute to the court, Absalom would get a hold of him and say to him, well, where'd you come from? Who are you? Where are you coming from? So the man said, well, I come from such and such a city, I'm from such and such a tribe, I have a case before the king. So Absalom would say to him, what's your case about? He would tell him. He said, it sounds as if you have a very good case, a very good claim, he said. But unfortunately, there's no one here to hear you. The king has no representative, no one to listen to you. Now, although this was not true, because there was a court, it was symptomatic of the fact that, as we shall learn, at this time, the King David had removed himself somewhat from the affairs of state because of the circumstances which we shall learn about. And Absalom said to him, if only I was a judge in the land and anyone had a complaint could be guaranteed of a hearing, I'll certainly hear them. And I would see that they received justice. And then the person would come to Absalom to bow down before him. Absalom would grab hold of him, reach his hand, and take him and kiss him and embrace him. Like a politician. That's what a politician does. He was a very astute politician. And this way it says that, the verse in fact says, Absalom behaved in this way towards all the Israelites who came to the king asking for justice, and so he stole the hearts of the people of Israel. So we see straight away he has ingratiated himself among the people. We'll have to consider also how this happened, because David was the greatest, beloved of all the nations. But here we see that Absalom was able, it says, to steal the hearts of the people. Okay, so that was now his first move. That is, established himself as a power. We see his power because he runs, he has a chariot and he has horses. He has 50 men running before him, and he steals the heart of the people. The book of Shmuel continues. At the end of 40 years, it doesn't say what the 40 years are, but we shall see that this is 40 years not from the rule of David, but 40 years from the first time that the people wanted a king. At the end of 40 years, so Absalom says to the king, his father, he says, let me go to Hebron, because I want to fulfill a vow that I made. While I was living in Geshur, which is Aram, which is modern-day Syria, I made a vow, which was that if the Almighty takes me back to Jerusalem, I will worship the Lord in Hebron. We shall see the circumstances in which he was living in Geshur and made this vow. And we shall see his purpose in telling David that he wanted to go to Hebron. Now remember, Hebron It was the capital of the tribe of Yehuda. And David and all his family come from Yehuda. They were from the tribe. And also David, before he was the king in Jerusalem or over all of Israel, was first of all king in Hebron. Hebron was a very important city as it is now. And it is the center of the tribe of Yehuda. At that time, the kingdom was from the tribe of Yehuda, from David. So it's a very reasonable request. I want to go to Hebron. I made a vow to bring sacrifices. And David said, yes, go in peace. So now Absalom sends secret messages throughout the country. And he says to them, as soon as you hear the sound of the shofar, maybe they wouldn't hear the sound of the shofar all the way in the north, but they would know that a shofar had been blown. He says, as soon as you hear the sound of the shofar, then you will say, Absalom is king in Hebron. So now we see that the plan of the revolt is coming into fruition, coming into action. So he's going to Hebron in order to proclaim himself king. And then it says, 200 men from Jerusalem accompanied Absalom. So on the face of it, that's a whole crowd of people, important people. But no, it says that they had been invited, so to speak, as guests. And they went quite innocently, knowing nothing about the matter. So the Talmud explains more about this. First of all, these 200 men were not just ordinary people. They were all members, and some say heads, of the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin is the great court in Jerusalem. Only 71 members of the Sanhedrin, but there were also deputies who sit with the Sanhedrin, and there were also lesser Sanhedrin. So there were 200 people who were at the level and rank of judges, important judges. What does it mean they went innocently? Absalom didn't go around and take a party of 200 men. What happened was he said to David, look, you know, I'm going to Hebron, I don't want to go on my own. The sages say an important person shouldn't travel on his own. So he said, I want to take 2 people with me. So David said, certainly. So Absalom will sign this note, which is 2 people, inviting 2 people to go with him. David signed, and Absalom goes and takes the note to 2 people. Will you come with me to Hebron? Then he goes to another 2 people. Look, the king says you should accompany me to Hebron. Another 2 people. Until he goes to 100 pairs, and he's got 200 people. So now on the way, I suppose they must have known that something was going on, but they didn't know what was going on. And he has these 200 important people come to him at Hebron. There he was offering sacrifices. He did say that he took a vow, and presumably he did, so he was offering sacrifices. And while he was offering sacrifices, he also sent for Achitophel the Gilonite. Achitophel was David's chief counselor, and we're told that his advice was like the advice of Rabbi Akiva, like God. He was the wisest man in the kingdom. Very wise, clever man, but a man who was an enemy of David. Even though he was David's chief counselor, he was an implacable enemy of David, as we shall see. And it is clear that he was really what they call the eminence grise. He was the power behind the revolt. In fact, the sages say that Achitophel really wanted to be the king himself. But he couldn't find a way, didn't think that he was strong enough to knock off David. So he thought, well, he'll support Absalom. Absalom will knock off David, be the king, and Absalom will be much easier for him to get rid of, and then he can be appointed king. Whatever, if the motives, Absalom sends for Achitophel, and Achitophel comes to Hebron, and the book of Shmuel says, and the conspiracy gained strength, and Absalom's following kept on increasing. Now, I want to say that the reason that he wanted 200 of the Sanhedrin to come to Hebron, and they brought Achitophel, was that his intention was to have some tribunal to remove David as king, so that he could then appoint himself as king. It seems to me that that was the purpose of bringing these people here, and that was what, to fulfill what he had said when he sent messages around. When you hear the shofar, you know that I will be the king. For him to be the king, he would have to remove David from being. So that therefore his intention was that there should be some kind of trial of David in Hebron. And that's why he brought the Sanhedrin there. So, if that's so, the first question that arises is whether you can try a king, whether a court is competent to try a king. That will be an important legal question. We shall see that the Talmud deals with that question. But before a court will decide whether it can try a king, it has to know, well, what are we trying him about? What's the case? I've said a court does not deal with hypothetical matters. If one goes to any kind of a court, the first thing that has to be decided is there a case to answer? What's it all about? I'm not going to decide as a judge this important question of whether a king can be tried until I know if there's something going on. We're not going to decide a hypothetical question assuming that there's some reason to try the king. Can we try him? You have to know what's the case. What is the case of that? So it would seem fairly clear that what the case was about was something that had happened some years before. And that was the story of Bathsheba and Uriah. This was, in my opinion, the basis of the procedure against David, both in the lower court and clearly, as we shall see, in the higher court, and also in the court of public appeal. So what's the story of Bathsheba and Uriah? It's well known, but we should read really the verses in the book of Shmuel which tell us the story. Then we'll talk about the parties, who Absalom was and who Achitophel was. But I think first we have to get some idea of what we're talking about. So the story is in chapter 11 of the book of Shmuel, page, and it tells us like this. It says, it was about the turn of the year of the times when kings go forth, that David had sent Joab and all of Israel, and they were doing a battle against Ammon, and there was a siege on Rabbah. Now normally the king goes out with his army. That's one of the main functions of the king, is to lead the army. But this time David didn't do that. He had more or less defeated all his enemies. And there was more or less just a mopping up operation. His general is Joab, who was his nephew. And Ammon is in modern day Jordan. And Rabbis, all the same today. So Yoav and the army were besieging the city of Rabbah. And the verse says that David was staying in Jerusalem. And it says towards evening, he got up from his couch and he went for a walk on the roof of the palace. And from the top of the roof he saw a woman bathing. And the woman was very, very beautiful. I won't say a woman, but we'll see she was very young. A maiden, let's call her. So David sent, he saw this beautiful woman, a naked woman. How he saw this, we'll have to explain all that. The verse doesn't explain it. It just says he saw a beautiful woman. And David sent to find out who this woman was. And he may himself have said this. He said, isn't this Bathsheba? Or someone else said, maybe it's Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, who is the wife of Uriah the Hittite. Now Eliam, by the way, was the son of Achitophel, and therefore Bathsheba was the granddaughter of Achitophel. But here it tells us not that, it tells us that she is the wife of Uriah the Hittite. The Hittite, now the Hittite were a tribe, one of the tribes of Canaan when we came into Eretz Yisrael. So it could be that he was originally from that tribe and he converted, or it could be that he was called a Hittite because he lived in the area where the Hittites were. So now David knows who this beautiful maiden or this beautiful girl is. So he sent messengers and he took her. And the messengers brought her to him. She came to him and he had sexual relations with her. And the verse adds, she had cleaned herself from ritual impurity. He explains this in a moment. She then went back to her house after the relationship. But she conceived. She got pregnant. And she sent a message to David. She said, I have conceived. I'm pregnant. No further explanations in the verse. Of course, we should require to understand all this much better. So now David hears that she's pregnant, on the face of which she's the wife of some other man. Okay, what's he going to do? So he sends a message to Yoav. Now her husband, Uriah the Hittite, was a captain, was an officer in his army, and he was serving with Yoav. So David sends a message to Yoav, his general, and he says, send me Uriah the Hittite. I want to see him. So Yoav sends him back, and Uriah comes to see David. So Uriah thinks David wants to know what's happening about the war, the progress of the war. You know, that's why he sent for him. And indeed, David asked, what's happening? How's Yoav doing? How's the army doing? What's happening in the welfare of the warriors? And Uriah reports to David. And then David says to him, well, now, very good, now go home and wash your feet. What do you mean, wash your feet? So it's two possibilities. Wash your feet simply means he's in battle, he's been in the battle, he's come back dirty after a long journey. Go home and wash your feet. But it could also be a euphemism. Go home and live with your wife. You know, you're on leave, you've been out in the field with the army. Go home and have relations with your wife. Why? On the face of it, because he wants to cover up, and that he knows Bathsheba is pregnant. So people will think, well, Uriah came home on leave, and that's how she got pregnant. But Uriah says, no, I don't want to go home. He says, I'm a soldier. He says, all the rest of my soldiers are out in the field, in the tents, in Ammon, and it's not nice for me to go home and be with my wife. I'm going to sleep downstairs, because the king, in the king's palace, he always has soldiers guarding his house. I'm going to sleep back there. I don't know if he said that to David, but he said that to himself, and that's what he did. Although David had sent a whole feast for Uriah's return to his wife, he'd sent a whole feast so that he could enjoy himself. But David didn't want to do that. But Uriah didn't want to do that, and so he lay down with the king's soldiers outside the house, and he didn't go home. And they told David this. They said, Uriah didn't go home. So David called him. He said, how come you didn't go home? You come back from a journey, you've got a day's leave. Why didn't you go to your house? So Uriah said again, well, the Israel, the Arona Kodesh was there apparently. Israel and Yehuda were all staying in huts, out camping in a battle. Should I then come home and eat and drink with my wife? God forbid. I wouldn't do such a thing. And the David said, all right, we'll stay here today and then go back to the battle tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll send you off. So Uriah stayed in Yerushalayim that day, and that evening David called him again. And he said, well, now you're here, I want you to eat with me and drink with me. And he gave him plenty to drink, and he made him drunk. So David thought, now he's drunk, he'll go home to his wife. I gave him a chance last night, I'll give him a second chance. But Uriah again wouldn't do it, and he went downstairs and slept outside with his soldiers. So David could see, well, this wasn't working. I better think of something else. So what did he do? So he wrote a letter to Yoav, the general, and he gave it to Uriah, and he said, give this note to Yoav, the general. Why did he write him a note? He wrote and said, put Uriah directly in front of the fiercest fighting, and then have the soldiers that are with him withdraw, so he's going to be left on his own, and then he's going to die. Quite clearly, with second ambiguity. He wrote in a letter to Yoav, put him in the front of the forces, and leave him on his own, so that he's going to die. And that's what happened. When Yoav got the note, he was besieging, he put Uriah in a place right where the most powerful warriors of the enemy are. The men of the city came out and they fought, and some of the soldiers died, and Uriah also died with them. So Yoav sent, and he told David what happened, and he said to the messenger, go and tell the king that there was a battle, and we lost some soldiers, and the king is going to get upset. Well, how come we lost soldiers? We were a superior force, we shouldn't have lost anyone. And when the king is angry about this, and says, how come you went so close to the city and put yourself in danger, people got killed? Didn't you know they shoot from the top of the wall? And you remember the previous case, Al-Melech, a woman threw a millstone over the wall. Why did you come so close to the wall? So then, when he's angry, you say to him, oh, well, by the way, Uriah the Hittite also died. So, exactly that happened. The messenger came, he said that we went close to the wall, the enemy overpowered us, and we repulsed them. They shot arrows from the top of the wall, and some of the king's servants died, and also Uriah the Hittite also died. So David said, okay, go back and tell Yoav, don't get upset, don't be worried, somehow or another we'll win, you should be strong against the city, destroy it. And that's what happened. And then Uriah's wife heard that her husband had died. She mourned over him. The mourning period passed, whatever, 7 days, 30 days. And David sent for her, brought her into his house, married her, She became his wife, and she had a son. And the prophecy says, the deed that David had done was deemed evil in the eyes of Hashem. That's the story. Now, we're going to have to match up that story and the next chapter with what the Talmud says, which says that if anyone says David sinned, he was mistaken. On the face of it, it's a terrible story. And the Abarbanel, one of the great commentators on the Torah, who was a very important man in the court of Spain at the time of Columbus and at the time of the expulsion of the Jews. Some say that he was the one who financed Columbus's enterprise. Suggestions that Columbus may have been Jewish. But the Abarbanel brings 5 charges against David because of this. First of all, he says, well, he committed adultery, because it says that Bathsheba was the wife of Uriah. That's a terrible sin. Adultery is one of the sins which is punishable by death. And then this cover-up, right? So not only is it wrong, was the cover-up wrong, but there would be apparently possible very bad consequences. Because if the cover-up had succeeded, and the son was going to be thought to be the son of Uriah and Bathsheba, in the future he might marry a daughter of David. So he might finish because he didn't know it was his sister. So it could lead to this very bad consequence, possibly, that a man would have relations with his sister. And thirdly, what about this? He sent him to die. How could he do that? And also, not only did he send him to die, but also regular innocent men were also killed in the same skirmish. And finally, he couldn't wait a few moments. As soon as she finished her mourning, he took her home and he married her. So these are the charges against David. And I want to say that these are the charges that I think Achitophel, that's right, sent for Achitophel, brought before the Sanhedrin to see that they should bring a case against David and remove him from being the king. So now they would have to consider the question whether we can try a king, whether we have power to try a king. And that's one legal question that we will go into. However, before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about the background of the revolt. I do not think that Absalom revolted against David because of this affair. First of all, it was a long time before that, as we shall see. And secondly, if it weren't for David HaMelech, these are the sort of things that kings do at these times. During these times, right? See a woman, they take her, they have relations, they want to get rid of the husband, they get rid of the husband. So that's, although it's not the sort of thing that we would expect from the king of Yehuda, and certainly it's totally out of context. It's impossible to think that David would do such a thing on the face of it. But it happened, and we don't see specifically that Absalom brought the revolt because he was outraged by David's conduct. On the contrary, he brought the revolt for different reasons. He brought the revolt because he wanted to be the king. And I think it was Achitophel's advice who brought this matter up in order to justify an impeachment case against him. But how did they know about it? Well, how did they know about it? They knew about it, the first part about Bathsheba, because David sent for her, and two of his servants brought her home. But also they knew about it because David, remember, had sent a note to Joab telling him to make sure that Uriah was killed. And Joab, for his own reasons, we'll talk about Joab, showed this note. He didn't destroy the note. He showed this note. Perhaps he only showed it to one or two people, but the note existed, the story existed, so it was well known. So who's Absalom? I said Absalom was the third son of David. The eldest son was Amnon. The second son, who was the son of Abigail, beautiful wise woman, was Caleb, also called Daniel. And he was the son of a woman called Makkah. So Makkah was the daughter of the king of Geshur. We already heard that Absalom said, when I was in Geshur, I took a vow. So Geshur is was a nation, probably a smallish nation, around modern Syria on the way to Damascus, which is in the northeast. However, the story of Absalom's mother, David's wife, Makkah, happened not then. That happened when David was fleeing from Shaul, and he was around the area of the Philistine, which is in the southwest. And it says at that time that David had like battles against various nations, and one of them was the people of Geshur. And they say that this Makkah, the mother of Absalom, was what is called an Eshet Yafetah. Eshet Yafetah, the Pasha, the Torah says, and when you go out to war, and among the captives you see a beautiful woman, so it's permissible for someone to have, now someone I take it that is someone who is in charge of the captives, which would be a king or a captain or a general. He sees this beautiful woman who he desires, and therefore he's allowed to have sexual relations with her, provided that he then takes her home and prepares her to be converted to the Jewish. He only allowed to have relations once, they say. And then, if she's converted, he marries her, and a normal married life. If she doesn't want to convert, so he has to let her go. So Makkah, the daughter of a king, was a captain. And David, he wasn't yet the king, but he was in charge of his own band of soldiers, saw her with a beautiful woman, and he had relations with her. And then she converted, and they married, and she had a son called Absalom. In the Torah, Parsha dealing with the right of a man to take such a beautiful woman, the Parsha immediately after that deals with the son who is a rebellious son. The whole Parsha in the Torah about a rebellious son, when he's 12 years old, doesn't want to do what his parents tell him to do. All he wants to do is drink and eat. He steals food and drink, and he doesn't listen to his parents. And one of the very, perhaps the only occasion, is taken to court and he can be killed, not for what he did, but for what he's going to be done, because he's already shown his aptitude to be rebellious. And the Talmud says, why are these things put together? Because if someone takes a woman, a captive woman, which really shouldn't do, and it says he only does it because he's going to do it anyway, the Rabbis will make it legal and give a proper way of doing it, out of that relationship will become a rebellious son. So that's very appropriate, because out of that relationship comes Absalom. Okay. So now what's the story about Absalom? Absalom had a sister called Tamar. And Tamar was probably conceived before Makkah converted. At the time when David saw that she was a captive, I said they were allowed to have relations once, and probably that was when this sister Tamar was conceived. She was still the sister rather of Absalom biologically, but if she was conceived, and perhaps even if she was born, maybe the mother didn't convert for some time, so certainly if she was born and then converted, although she was his sister biologically, she wasn't his sister halachically. That may make a difference. So now Absalom has this beautiful sister called Tamar. And David's eldest son, Amnon, saw this beautiful girl Tamar, who was like his sister, half-sister, and he fell in love with her, and he had a tremendous desire for her. Now she was a very snooze, modest girl, and she lived although she lived in the palace, I'm sure that the men and the women, or sons and daughters were separate. She didn't have anything to do with Amnon, but Amnon saw her every day, and every day he had more and more passion for her. So much so that he doted for her and he couldn't do anything. All he could do, remember this is the king's eldest son who would be groomed to be the successor. And he had this great passion for her. Now this is after, I should say that all this is after the episode of Bathsheba and Uriah, as we shall see, because we shall see that there was a judgment in the heavens against David, and all the terrible problems that he will have in his family will come as a result of the judgment in the heavens because of this episode. So Amnon sees her, and he can't deal with his life. All he does is death for her. So he has a friend, who actually is also David's nephew, who will give him certain advice, because Tamar didn't want to have anything to do with that. There are two possibilities. One is perhaps he could have married her, but he thought perhaps, well, I'm in line to be the king. And it's true, she's the daughter of David, but her mother perhaps wasn't even converted at the time she was born, and not so nice that I should marry. She's in a way my sister, which is forbidden, although halachically it may be possible, but that's not so. Then he could also have made her what's called a palegesh, which is like, it's not quite a wife, but they have a proper legal relationship. But she didn't want any of them. So therefore, the friend gives him certain advice, and we'll continue that piece next week. And we'll see.
Yeah.